but his hand is stretched out still. For wickedness burneth as the fire, it shall devour the briars and thorns, and shall kindle in the thickets of the forest, and they shall mount up like the lifting up of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts is the land darkened, and the people shall be as the fuel of the fire. No man shall spare his brother.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. I don't know why my camera gone. Was it not working? Anyways, we're continuing today in the book of Genesis. We'll have the camera in a moment. It's just gonna. It usually this resolves itself. It was working a moment ago. All right, so we're gonna begin at chapter 13. There's the camera's working now. There we go. Not that it's essential for sure. And we're gonna be in verse 1. I think, right? Oh, no. Yeah, so we might pick it up. Let's pick it up the reading. Verse 7. Their substance was so great they couldn't dwell together, right? And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abraham said unto Lot, or Abram, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan. And Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves one from another. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art, northward and southward, and eastward and westward. For all the land that thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it, and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. Then Abram removed his tent, and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of nations, probably like that, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. I can't say anything about those pronunciations. I can't make any comment. All right, 1 second here. Okay. All right. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. Notice the Salt Sea right there, by the way. 12 years there they served Chedorlaomer, And in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Emims in Sheva Kirathaim, and the Horites in the Mount Seir, unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to En-Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazezon Tamar. Hazezon Tamar, that looks pretty good. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar. And they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim, with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, the king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their victuals, and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, his kinsman, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is by the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought back again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and of the kings that were with him, at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thine hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said unto the king of Sodom, I have lift up my hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread, even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich, save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them take their portion. Because he had those in confederate with him. There's a complicated, not that a simple story, but there's some complicated details. I wish I understood them a little better. We'll see what we can do. So then we go back to 14 and the critical things. When we talk about promises in the New Testament, that to whom pertain the promises? These are the things I go on about when I talk about Abram, because that is the critical thing. It's because all these things were promised. The land. Look at the land. That would be also that you would be a blessing to the nations. There's separate promises. There's the land promise that they would possess the land to him and his seed. Now, as the spiritual seed of Abraham, which we should identify ourselves as, according to the New Testament, we understand this because Jesus himself even taught it, that they that do the works of Abraham, those are the seed. Just as ultimately it was not all that were Abraham's children that were counted for the seed, because he had other children other than Isaac. And Isaac was the seed called. And then it became, and because the promise was through Sarah, not just anyone. But then with Isaac, he had 2 sons by one woman, by Rebekah, by the same woman, same race. Though they were different, there was no hanky-panky insinuated anywhere, Sometimes brothers can be very different. Like my brother and I, we bear a strong resemblance to each other, but we are, I have brown hair, he has blonde hair. I have brown eyes, he has blue eyes. I have kind of swarthy, olive skin. He's a little more fair. That's from our childhood when we looked very much like kind of the opposite. The same thing with Esau and Jacob, right? They were not to them yet, but anyways. But the elder shall serve the younger. The Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. They were the same line. It's not about the line. Though the line is important, the promise is to a seed. And so it is passed down like that. And because that is how life proceeds. From father to son, from mother to daughter, to mother to son, umbilical cord to umbilical cord, the seed of the woman proceeds on. And the promise goes to the seed, to the next generation. But but only to those who can obtain it by faith. Because there aren't other ways to obtain it. Because it must be, you can only be the seed if you are reckoned so by God. He judges it. I mean, we consent, but it's ultimately God who makes these things to be. It makes the reality of our relationship a reality. It's not one-sided. It can't be. So the land is... So the land, you understand, that's part of the obsession that there is with the land of Palestine because it was promised to the children of Israel. So there's controversy. And because it was promised to them, it is their most sacred site, ultimately, because of the temple and all that. Though, you could say, I could quote the prophets, according to the prophets, it was always waiting. Heaven is my throne. The earth is my footstool. Where is the house that you would build for me? God always wanted men, Jerusalem, even when he made the temple, when he allowed the temple to be built, and that's the proper word, he allowed it. It was reluctantly. Lest people should think that God dwells in a house made with men's hands. But he allowed it. A lot of this stuff is allowed for our sakes. God wasn't like, I demand a temple. Build me a temple. No, did God ever say, build me an altar, build me an altar? Make me a sacrifice, make me a sacrifice? Is there any place yet in Genesis he ever said, make me a sacrifice, build an altar? It's the things that men do. That's why I say, worshiping God isn't something God commands. It's something we naturally do when we recognize God. If we recognize God for what he is and the reality of that faith creates a worshipful attitude, as one would expect if you really thought there was a gentleman in the sky who could see all your doings and cared because he was maker of all things and was going to hold you responsible for what you did. And when you consider that reality, on some level that's real, even if that's not an imperfect understanding. I may not perfectly understand God, but I may fear him with the proper, the orientation that I got to do what's right. And there comes the conviction. But the promises of God include the land, the multitude of thy seed, right? I will give to your seed and to your posterity. Because we also, again, we have posterity. We have our natural children. And to them also are promises available. Just like it says, what advantage hath the Jew? As a Christian, your children have advantages, especially if husband and wife are believers together. I've witnessed this advantage. As my children grow up and then they become adults, I get a very good report of them, of strangers. Anyways, so the blessing of the seed, the multiplying of your seed. I mean, not that you have to think of it locally on your own, but also like as far as just like, oh, do I have a lot of children? It's like, well, I know of someone, someone was telling me about someone, and they have no children. They never married, and for whatever reasons, because it's not for everyone. Jesus himself said this, that some are eunuchs of nature, some are eunuchs for the kingdom of God, and some are eunuchs of men's, are made by men. And, because it's not for everyone, but it is a calling that is generally for most of us. And in it, we can be blessed by, by following what the dictates of faith should move us to do for our children. To prepare them ultimately to encounter God themselves. And it's something, it's something you can't really do for them. I mean, I can't intercede. I'm not going to intercede. I can make prayers and all that. But ultimately, I can't stand between them and God, ultimately. Now, while they're children, you sort of do. Because because they're children. And also that sort of, the idea that your children are sanctified through your faith is an interesting one to me, because that implies some sort of like that there is just as we are our faith sanctifies us by the blood of Christ. If it has a similar effect on our children while they're children, at least, until they're responsible, until they know or whatever. So the multiplicity, and so that, yes, the Jews are numerous. But Abraham has so many more children, and the children of Abraham, Jesus said, the children of the flesh, these are not the children of Abraham. And like I said, people get this racial thing with the Kenites and all that, and they think the Jews are not really the Jews or something. It wouldn't matter, because it's like, what was Esau's excuse? Was he the wrong race? What were the men of Belial's excuse who raped that priest's wife, or his concubine? Sorry, sometimes I'm too genteel for the world of the Bronze Age. I live in a world where slavery has been virtually wiped out, or we think it has, right? We pretend it's been wiped out. I don't see it. Even though I don't know how much. Maybe what there's some portion of things in this room maybe that were handled by slaves at some point. I'm just saying, it's so funny how people strut around with such moral superiority to the people of the past, but at the same time, so unconscious of all the ways in which they are ignorantly as bad as any generation, and maybe worse, in their callous disregard for human life. And he says, walk through the land. I'm going to give it to you, the land. This focuses primarily on the concrete aspects of the promise, the land and the seed, right? But like I said, there's a spiritual aspect to that, because ultimately, the land, like it says, I'm guessing that the land here is probably. I wonder if it's Eretz, just like we normally. I want to check that real quick. So I could get a dead end here, but the land, yeah, it's funny. This is the same word that we think of as meaning planet Earth. You know what I mean? Meaning when it says in the beginning God made the heaven and the earth, this is what He made. And also when the flood came, it came and covered all the earth, or the Eretz, the land. It's a word that can mean a vast number. It can mean the earth in a very big way and also in a very small way. So it's going to depend on context. And then context is going to depend on intent. So here, the intent is obvious, right? It means the land that he's looking at. But in the promise is even greater than that, because the meek shall inherit the earth, the whole thing. That though the children of Israel are given, that is the land that God has allotted to the children of Israel. And it is indeed a good land. It was even better in those days and will be made like the Garden of Eden again. And that is their place in God's kingdom. That's the place, the land that they shall inherit. I don't expect as a Gentile to inherit that, but I do expect that of the earth that God has given, and he's given his portions to the nations, that I will inherit. Whatever that means. I don't really put a lot of, I don't put a lot of stock in like personal ownership per se. God owns everything. And as his heir, I expect that in the sort of the eternity to come, we own all with God. In common, like a family, and so it's not, there's no need to own things myself. Though I think in the millennium, it is I don't know. In the millennium, I do think there is a sort of an allotment of but it's more like responsibility. And in that sense, if you think about ownership in terms of responsibility, I think there will be that kind of ownership in the kingdom of God, and beyond. Because I don't think, because I think there's something to the idea that, God is a creator, and he also has given it to us to be creative and to explore and stuff and to be curious. And it's good to to express that. I think that's part of what we're created for and to do. We have a purpose. And so it is to continue that purpose forever. It's not just to I don't think it's an eternal Sabbath of no work, no toil. They shall enjoy their labor, as it was intended at the beginning in the Garden of Eden, to tend the garden and to work the garden, but not to, in the sweat of your brow, eat the dust of all your, till you return to the dust. No, it's supposed to be, joyful work, pleasant work. I've done a lot of joyful, it'd be great if my body responded, without aches and pains, if the sun would not smite, it's too hot. I like gardening, but there are some days are better than others for it, right? And then when the bugs start getting to you late in the, in the summertime, right? A little bit of insects start nipping around. It's not as pleasant. And the weeds you got to pull out, and thorns, and it could be easier. It could be more challenging. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. I think that it will be whatever it is. It will be engaging to exist, just as it is now. If like I said, when I think of me having trouble, me struggling in existence, not having a good time of it, so to speak, having a hard time. Think about the hard times I have. But it's usually, if I feel negative, it's because a lot of physical things are affecting me. I may have like I said, when I just describe working in the garden, most of the problems I have with it are it's really hot. The bugs are biting me. I get tired. All these things. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I'm thirsty. I'm hot. It's hard. But sometimes it's real nice. The weather's perfect. And what I'm saying, there's sometimes when you work and it's just like a dream. And you love work. And I've enjoyed a lot of work. I have. And I think that's ultimately what is, Abraham. So anyways, God reiterates this promise to him about the land and his seed. And Abraham moves his tent, and he then dwells, again, separating himself from Lot in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. This comment, which is in Hebron, it stuck out to me immediately as oh, that's interesting. Because that sounds like a voice from the future. That does not sound like something that, for example, Abraham would next. Like if Abraham was writing this, he wouldn't write that. Was it known as Hebron then? I don't remember. It almost sounds like they say, "Oh, that's in Hebron." Hebron, the place that we made. Because later on, it isn't called the plain of Mamre anymore. It's called Hebron. When Abram dwelt there, I think it was called the plain of Mamre. And maybe it became Hebron because Abram, the Hebrew, lived there. And maybe that's why it became Hebron, because they mentioned him, Abram the Hebrew. He's called that literally here, and I think maybe that has something to do with it. And again, I could be wrong about that. That's just a stab in the dark, by the way. Don't take that to the bank. It's just a suspicion. Scholars know better. Anyway, that's why I get some of these place name type things and these guys. Here we have the kings. Amraphel, king of Shinar. We identify that as Babylon, right? Or at least the land of Babylon. And again, it's not called Babylon perhaps because that's not how it is. We know it is Babylon now. But then it was king of Shinar. I don't know. Arioch, king of Elasar, and Elam is over towards Persia. I know that. Title, king of nations. This is a title. Obviously, king of nations. It's just something a title he may have put on himself or whatever. That's what he was, king of nations. He had multiple peoples under him, perhaps. These made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, and with Shinab, king of Admah, Shemember, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. So these 4 kings make war with the 5 kings, including the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah. They were joined together in the Vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. So we know that Sodom and Gomorrah is supposed to be close to the Dead Sea, but it is not in the Dead Sea. I don't think it's ever said to be there. Sometimes people think that like the Dead Sea was created by the salt or something, but it's the Salt Sea is referenced before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we don't need to worry about that. It does, 12 years they served Chedorlaomer. In the 13th year they rebelled. That means they were subject to him. They had become subject, cutie. And they become subject nations, paying tribute. And then at some point, they were no longer, it must be, I know what that bucket represents. It's all right. Yeah, that's the clogged toilet bucket, by the way. Excuse me. Okay, so they were serving him as tribute states, tribute kings, and then this often happens. After a while, they get tired of paying, and they figure, let's fight. We'll throw off. Do you still have what it takes to make us pay? And so then they fight. Well, the 13th year they rebel, they don't pay. So then a year later he comes in to collect, along with his buddies. And this is typical, protection racket stuff going back to ancient times, right? And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him and smote the Rephaims and Ashtaroth Karnim and the Zuzims in Ham and the Emims in Shava Kirithaim. All of these are reckoned at different times to be the sons of to be giants or races of giants or nations of giants, if you will, or I should say families, descended from Emim, which was purported to be one of the giants. And it's kind of and again, when I say giants, don't assume we just mean giant physical people. Like Goliath, right? It could mean giants like the way we see the patriarchs as giant figures of history. I guess so. It implies something more. Like the Emims are mentioned 3 times. For example, like in Deuteronomy 2:10, these were definitely giants, though, the Emims. They dwelt there in times past, a people great and many, and tall as the Anakims, which were also accounted giants, as the Anakims, but the Moabites call them Emims. Interesting also, this passage in Deuteronomy is about Lot and stuff and about the Moabites, who were considered kin. We haven't gotten really to how, to the Moabites yet, but it comes into this Emim thing because they call them that. And here we see Lot's association with this. And Abram, they know these people, the Emims. And they are a people great. They're not, when it says they are, giants. I should look at the word giant, counted giant. Deuteronomy 2:11. All right, real quick. I want to see that on Bible Hub, right? That was interesting. Deuteronomy. You see what I saw there? Because it said giants there, and I forgot. Oh, look up giants. These were accounted giants. What were they accounted? Rephaim? Nephilim? Deuteronomy was 2, right? Yeah. 2 verse what? Did I just close the whole thing? Whatever. Anyway, it's right here. Give it to them in battle. Anakims, Esau, the Horims. Again, here we have Horims, another name mentioned. Horims, also the name of the name. Well, it's the name of several people, but they're also called the giants. Where they were counted giants. What's the word there? Here it is, Rapha. Here where it says that the Emims were accounted giants, it says giants. They were great and tall, and they were accounted Raphaim. Rapha, which is a word I've encountered numerous times, but never been able to nail down. They call it the Valley of Raphaim, but it was named after those people. And the word, the Raphaim, it's called a race of giants, but the name means like extinct or powerless. So it's sort of like a name that's like probably given them after their fall. I mean, they were great, but now they're Raphaim. Just like the term Nephilim means fallen ones. You know what I mean, right? Or fell ones, I should say, right? But that indicates in a sense of almost like danger, like fell creatures, fell beasts, evil. This is more in the sense of fallen, in the sense of fallen from power, extinct, or as shadowy, vaguely known. The Raphaim, they're, and again here, according to Strong, he sees it totally different. He's like, or Rapha from Rapha in the sense of invigorating, a giant. Because that's the traditional translation. We call them giants because it's Rapha. And he says it comes from this other word, Rapha, because remember in Hebrew, the vowel points are traditional, meaning it's basically, your guess is as good as mine, a little bit, because somewhat of that, when it comes to that, it's like, well, interpretations, man, that how it used to be interpreted, how it was intended to be interpreted, boy, that information is going to be hard to come by. This word Rapha means to heal. And Strong thinks perhaps it comes from this one. They're like the self-healing ones. They can heal you. That would be weird because I've always sort of, I've taken with a bit of salt, let's say. Meaning with some doubt. I've doubted the ability of Satan to heal. I mean, I've always, with some doubt, I've looked at that assumption with some doubt. With a little doubt. Meaning I don't think the kind of miracles Satan would perform would be healings and stuff. Giving sight to the blind like Jesus did. Like it would seem too incongruous. Like casting out, it would be too much like to accuse him of doing that as Satan would seem like blasphemy. You know what I mean? Because God, it would be, we assume the healing power to be with God. Satan comes to kill and to destroy. The only miracles that are mentioned that he performs, it says he will perform signs and wonders to deceive the elect, if possible, if it were possible to deceive them. That's actually a mixture of several passages, but that's okay. But it says he could bring fire down from heaven. Okay, well, that's the sort of thing I would expect Satan to do, right? As far as to demonstrate he has power. But still, I could be wrong about that. Maybe Satan has some limited healing power. Maybe they can heal themselves. He's going to heal the deadly wound, right? The deadly wound is healed. But that's not the same kind of healing, is that? You know what I mean? There's different, yeah, so it's like, it makes me think of, suddenly video games come to mind, right? And it's a weird thing to say, but okay. But it's an interesting, it's an interesting portal into the mind of evil sometimes, because what people think of in terms of what does evil look like. So in a video game I used to play, I forgot the name of it or which one this is in particular, but the good guys, their healing is all by like medicine, and they try to take care of people. But on the evil creatures, when they heal, it's like they're injecting these like serums that make them stronger for a while, but then they die, and it's all these kind of things that sort of have an effect of, well, immediately relieving the pain, kind of like alcohol dealing with your problems. You know what I mean? It's like it sort of immediately deals with the problems, but also creates a long-term problem. It does not really heal anything. It only makes a new wound. And that's the kind of healing Satan can do, surely. He can do that. He can do stuff that seems to make things better in the short run. But of course, in the long run, the ways their end are death. He can do things that seem to be pleasurable at the time, but then later prove to be harmful. So Satan can appear to heal. That should be noted. And that's why I say I doubt my assumption that he can't heal, because he can do things that look like healing. And so giants, maybe they have some relationship. Maybe that, I would say like, oh, they're long-lived, but the patriarchs were long-lived. And like we discussed, these giants, the result of a literal intermarrying with angels, or is it more like a technology transfer from angels? You know what I mean? Which would be more what I would get, like, in a sense, like, okay, these are sort of like supermen running around with and they have deeper knowledge of things. I don't know. Okay, so Hori to the Mount Seir, to El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Again, these Zuzims, all these names in this particular little part here, the Cheldoramer smites, when he comes in the 14th year, the Rephims, the Zuzims, the Emims, those are all, and again, notice it's in Ham. Again, Ham, the father of Canaan, Ham, son of Noah. These are his regions, and there's things in those regions that we think of as being pre-flood things going on. That's a good, I think, nice low-level way of talking about it without being too specific. I mean, you can see there's some stuff going on there in Canaan. God's bringing Abraham there, and and the children of Israel ultimately. And, in I remember my study Bible, part of what it suggests that the reason that the promised land and they were brought there is, one, to destroy those creatures or those people, because they represent something that was supposed to be destroyed and not supposed to be coming into the new world, and which indeed has been lost. And I think it did come through. Whatever the pre-flood technology, civilization, it kind of came through a bit, and then it got stamped out. And I've been kind of following that line of thought, actually, in my investigations on that side of things. So it's interesting, this little account here about the smiting of all these, Nephilim related peoples, you know. And, why he chose, again, they're somehow in league with Sodom. And Sodom's a pretty evil place, as it's already been said. The men of Sodom were evil, exceeding. Well, they were wicked sinners is the right way to put it. I mean, humanity isn't evil in its way. Evil is not a good word for that. I mean, humanity is evil. It's like, it's too cut and dry. We're not just evil. There's good and evil. And knowledge of both. So the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, the king of Bela, it's the same as Zoar. And then they go out to battle again. And I think the reason it's the same place, I think there was an original battle in the Valley of Siddim, and now there's a second battle. I think that's what we're reading. And after the first one, they'd fought with him, and then the battle was decisive. They served him then for 13 years, or 12 years, and in the 13th year they rebel. And it was 13. In the 13th year they rebel. It's the number of rebellion. Like that as far as in numbers, and, it's just the way... There is often a correlation of the numbers and in the scriptures, and it's like, it's hard to ignore. So I mention it. As far as that pattern reveals itself, over and over again, you observe the same pattern with numbers in the scriptures, and it's intentional a lot of times. There are 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 vials for a reason, for a numeric reason, because 7 is the proper number. Now, why? That's not clear why. I mean, why? It doesn't matter. It's just the fact. It does. It is. They represent certain things. And again, it's not like I said, don't make that a central core doctrine. It's like, we believe in the numbers. It's like it's just a side issue. It's something you use when trying to understand prophecy and symbolism. That's not too bad. With Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam and Tidal, okay, and those guys, 4 kings with 5. I'm not going to read all their names again. And the valley of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there. And they that remained fled to the mountains. So they had a bad day at the battle, right? They were put to flight. And so then the other kings sacked their cities. They took all their goods and their victuals, their food, and just the good stuff, and went their way. Well, good. Now we got it. We took your stuff. Told you we'd come for it. They also took Lot away because he was there. He wasn't fighting. He was just there, and he was a rich guy, and they took him hostage or whatever. You come with us. Slaves. Who knows? Captive. It was very customary. Take the civilians away. At least they didn't kill them. They were there for riches, not for rape. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew. Again, Abram the Hebrew. For he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite. It became Hebron. Because Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner. These were confederate with Abram. So when Abram goes here, he has confederates with him. The Amorites. He's allied with them. And, it's interesting because later on the Amorites are particularly the subject of God's wrath. Not so much here. They are not the worst of the worst at this time. Their fall or whatever into, again, well, but Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed, but the wickedness in Canaan continues. And also when the Israelites come, it continues, unfortunately. Canaan seems to be a land that just, it's funny because we think of it as the Holy Land, but it could also be thought of as the unholy land. Because, man, all kinds of unholy stuff. They polluted that land with the blood of innocent victims. The Israelites, who should have known God, caused their children to pass through the fire unto Molech on that sacred land, It's not the Holy Land. I don't think the Bible ever calls it a Holy Land, by the way. That's a modern idea. The Holy Land is the Promised Land. Yes, for real. Promised Land, the land that floweth with milk and honey. I don't think it's ever called a Holy Land. Now, the land vomits out the inhabitants. The land would like to be people to behave themselves. It could be holy in the sense of set apart or separate. I gotta hit that buzzer before it gets annoying. All right. Let me just look at the... I'm trying to get up, and at the same time, I want to keep talking. All right, I can't. Well, they're gonna... All right, let's just do this. All right. Just gotta touch the little fan for a second. Ow, it hurts to sit down. Sorry, I have a minor boo-boo on my posterior. Sat down too hard. Accidentally. Anywho, let's go. All right. So they go and they see his brother. By that it means his brother and kinsman, you know. We are brethren. Just like he said before, we are kins, we are brethren. Brethren. I don't know why I said that. We are brothers. He armed his... They don't always have words for cousins and stuff. They just say he's my brother. It means kinsman. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And again, it doesn't mention them, but the Amorites are with him. They're mentioned later. They take their portion, of the spoil. But Abram is leading this effort. They are confederate with him. He has 318 men trained, born in his own house, his own servants. Again, slaves, yes. As God came to him and said, I'm going to make you a great nation. Being a big house, if you were rich, like I said, in this world, it was probably the best thing you could do is buy up as many people as you could. It's one of the kindest things you could do in that world. Give them a home, give them a family, give them someplace to survive. Especially considering, like, say you were living in a village and it gets attacked by a bunch of people and all your family's killed and now you're off, who knows? Who are you going to get sold to? Some weird pedophile? You bet they used to show up at those things, right? Or maybe just someone like Abram. Now, again, his trained servants were born in his house. They were not even... These were people born in his house, not that kind of slave. Not bought, is what I'm saying. Not captive slaves. But these are people who were part of his household. And oftentimes there are servants, there were rules for servants who didn't want to leave service. And often that happened. Because if you got in with someone who was really good and not a son of a, what. And again, because you didn't, in America, we had like a nation that was cohesive. They live in a time of city-states. When the nation of Israel comes, they make laws about fugitive slaves that wouldn't make any sense in our country because that you weren't allowed to return fugitive slaves. In America, they were like, oh, we got to get the fugitive slaves no matter where they go in the country, right? They would hunt them down in other parts of the country. Bounty hunters and stuff. But I think that's right. But that's not our difficulty with that is not the point. Back then, it was very different, and we're talking city-states. So if you beat your slaves, they're going to run away, and you're never going to find them. There's no there's no police. You can't go to the. You might find bounty hunter. In Roman times, you might track down because you have a central authority if they care. It depends on how important you are. Again, if you have resources, you can track them down yourself and punish them yourself. You would be allowed to do that. Or you could just treat them humanely and they wouldn't run away. And oftentimes, Abram is the kind of person who treats his servants like humans. Born in his own house, I take to be a term of affection. These aren't just mercenaries. These are people that are born in his own house. Members of his household. and they're going to save his cousin or his nephew, right? So he is, Abram is a man of very strong loyalty. He's going to go protect his nephew, going to save him from captivity. And he divides him, and they attack by night. His force, it doesn't say how big the 5 kings' force was. But you gotta understand, after the battle, they defeat them. What he's doing a rear guard, he's attacking like the rear of their train, perhaps. So he doesn't have to defeat the whole army necessarily. He's just rescuing the captives and taking back the spoil. Because and it's mostly a slaughter. Again, it's by night, and it's a victorious army, so they're coming in by night. It's kind of a slaughter, as far as whatever portion of the army is there. Like I said, it doesn't have to be the whole thing. Could be, I don't know. But maybe it's just Chedorlaomer, because it doesn't, and the kings that were with him. And it's more of a slaughter, not a battle. So that's what you got to think of. It's like, it's just a nighttime raid. And then, so there's, after the slaughter of the kings, the king of Sodom goes out to meet him. Also, Melchizedek, king of Salem, brings forth bread and wine. And he was the priest of the Most High God. It's interesting that the king of the most wicked city goes out to meet him. And then this Melchizedek goes out to meet him. Now, we have so much to say about Melchizedek from the New Testament, right? Because of what Paul said in Hebrews, and also what was written in the Psalms. Because here we have a very small account. He brings forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he says, "Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thine hand." And Abraham paid him tithes. Hold on a second. Abraham paying him tithes, that means he pays a tenth of his increase or whatever, his goods. Sorry. So it's like he pays him taxes, essentially. He gives him a tax. He's Melchizedek, king of Salem, which means king of peace. We interpret that as king of Jerusalem. Is he king of the Jebusites? It's a sort of a mysterious figure. Now, what has been said about Melchizedek, though, elevates him beyond human. Now, I heard one thing said is one thing was suggesting, is this Shem, Ham, and Japheth Shem, the son of Noah, because he's still alive at this point in Abram's life, at least according to the, if that genealogy, again, if Canaan is where we talked about the missing Canaan, the other Canaan, where'd he go, Canaan? I think that would mean he couldn't be there. And there's some other stuff too, where it's like I said, what are people thinking they're fixing? Unfortunately, out of good intentions, many people probably think, "Oh, this is a mistake. This, someone copied this wrong," and they fix it, and it's actually they're corrupting the text. And it's always good intentions. That's why you don't get like a lot of weird changes, like Jesus suddenly saying the meekness is no good. It's not for anybody. You got to be rude and not no control. Just just express yourself. Self-expression is the highest value. There's no part where somebody changed the Bible to say like fornicate all the time. It used to say fornicate, but then some prude came along and changed it to don't. Right? Yeah, I mean, it's like the wisdom has not changed a whole lot. And if it did, it would be like, doesn't make sense. And sometimes there are passages that don't make sense. And sometimes it's because there's been a little bit of a misunderstanding, a little bit of a miscopy, maybe. It's a very small amount, but it can be, depending on where it is, it can make a big difference. when you talk about things like numbers and years, you're talking about things that can get really messed up in a hurry. You change one number in a sentence, you change one word in a sentence, it can have no effect at all. You change one number in a string of numbers, that can change everything. In fact, there's examples of that. There was one where it's like some number in the millions is given. They smote 100,000 of them, and it's like, no, that's not. It was actually a couple thousand, and that's what it meant. Just a copying area. That's in Judges. We'd have to get to that. I'm not going to dig that up. I'm not here to just dig things up to cast doubt on that. I'm just saying it because we have to consider. Okay, so this Melchizedek is described as being without father, without mother, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. So how could that be any man? That's why we consider the Melchizedek to be Christ, to be a pre-incarnate Christ. That's why Jesus said, or that's why we believe, many of us, right, that when Jesus said, Abraham, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. And people, what did he mean by that? He rejoiced to see my day. Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. And he doesn't fully explain that. But maybe this was it. He had seen the pre-incarnate Messiah. Because again, the works were finished from before the foundation of the world. The pre-incarnate Messiah would be the exalted Messiah, I think. You know what I mean? He would be as he was, which was, when he became a man, we don't think like he became more than he had been, but he became not less than he had been, but he laid aside certain attributes of divinity to be a man. As far as, or we could say, actively suppress them would be maybe a better way of saying it, because he still had all those attributes, but he could, in his body, he could die. And for one, he could become hungry. He could experience everything the man experienced because he was really and truly human. And so, but this Melchizedek is not a normal human being because he's without father, without mother, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. What kind of man is such a thing? That's why it's interesting that it's something, but it says, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. That's what the Psalm says. The order of Melchizedek is this eternal priesthood to which Abram pays tithes because it exists. There were some questions about the religion of the antediluvian fathers. Obviously, it persists. I see why people would think maybe this is Shem, because he is the torchbearer, right? Noah, Shem. Shem, Arphaxad, Canaan, Ru, Serug, and all the rest. I may have missed one or two. I used to memorize those genealogies, but I let it slip, and I have no desire to try to fix that because it's just not worth it. Because you have to actively, continually. I could do it again for you and perform the trick like a little doggy, like a performing seal. Look, I can rattle off. I can rattle off Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. I still remember the books of the Bible: Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Samuel, Kings, Chronicles. Ruth. Excuse me, but that's not worth it. We have to know how to, possess ourselves. If we encounter Melchizedek, do we know enough to give tithes? Do we know how to properly encounter one made like unto the Son of God who abides a priest continually? He's mysterious here, but I think we know who he is. He brings forth bread and wine. Why is he bringing forth bread and wine? Why are you being that way, Jesus? Why are you dropping such heavy-handed clues? He brought forth bread and wine. Who's famous for bread and wine? Who is it? You know? Bread and wine. He was the priest of the Most High God. And said, blessed be Abram, of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. Blessed be the Most High God. El Elyon. Right? El Elyon? Is that El Elyon? El Aloha? I forget. I used to know better all the different versions of the, of how they refer to the Lord. El Shaddai, right? And all that stuff. El Elyon, God Most High, or is it I forgot what it is. Oh, it's the next chapter. That's what, right? Yep. 14. So, priest of the Most High God. The Most High. Elyon. Yeah, right. El Elyon. God Most High. Now, some people think that's actually a different God than Yahweh. Because of the difference, because you can look at, like, for example, Molech means king. Malek. And we call God our king. Right? But they focus on that one aspect. And some people would say, well, then he's just another God. No, the other gods are imitations of the true God. That's what Paul says from the beginning. When they knew God, they honored him not unto God as God, but made God like unto an image, like unto corruptible man, and like unto four-footed beasts. And they worshipped and served the creature more than the creator. Not just the form of the creature, but the desires of the creature, the passions of the creature. That's why the gods of the nations became debased and debauched, filthy, sinful gods, like unto men. Zeus goes around committing adultery and fornicating with earthly women, producing bastard offspring. That's the kind of God they served. Because that's the kind of men they were. Going around fornicating, siring bastard offspring, making war. God also makes war, will make war. He is fully capable of all those things. And fathering sons. And so he does in his own way, but he looks after his sons. He doesn't make bastards. But that's what Satan does, So I'm thankful for chastisement, right? It means we are sons and not bastards. Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And he blessed and he gave him tithes of all. Okay. We'll probably say a little more about Melchizedek next time, because I would like to say more about it. But we've kind of said most of what there is to say, though. There isn't a lot of information. We have the Psalms, but the information we do, here's the thing, is like, I've never really heard anyone really emphasize that Melchizedek passage the way I do, as far as the fact that really proves Christ has no beginning. Because Melchizedek has no beginning. No beginning of days. Because that was, for me, when I looked at that, I was like, okay, Christ has no beginning. Because I was in a church where I think it wasn't being made clear to me, but I believe the pastor thought that Christ did have a beginning. And he still celebrated him as God and Lord and all that. But that aspect of divinity he did deny, I believe, at the time, at least. And I say at the time because I hope that maybe he'd come to the conclusion that maybe that's not so. But I said, if Melchizedek is without father, without mother, without beginning of days, and Christ isn't, then is Melchizedek not greater than Christ? And if he's greater than Christ, then he can be no other than Christ. I mean, that's why. He must be Christ, because there can be no greater. And I think that is ultimately where the argument has to stand. Because if this is not Christ, then one greater than Christ exists. And that just can't be. Except the Father himself. But that is never, we never suppose this to be the Father. Though God already appeared to Abram. It doesn't say God appeared, but this other figure who is like God, a king of the just. Who is, sort of follow, like, again, taking on the knowledge of good and evil and then following it to a walk with God. I want to talk more about walking with God, but we'll talk about that tomorrow, I think, if we get a chance. Or we will eventually when it occurs to me, that's for sure. So thanks for joining me this day. I look forward to being back tomorrow. We'll continue in Genesis. It's always a good thing to remember all the things that were written before and to remind ourselves. So until tomorrow, thanks for joining me.
But his hand is stretched out still. For wickedness burneth as the fire, it shall devour the briars and thorns, and shall kindle in the thickets of the forest, and they shall mount up like the lifting up of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts is the land darkened, and the people shall be as the fuel of the fire. No man shall spare his brother.